I'm Lisa Minardi, Director of Historic Trappe and our Center for Pennsylvania German Studies.
I'm Christopher Malone and the Curator.
And so today we're going to take you on a tour through the galleries of the center as well as our new special exhibition, Valley Culture. All right, let's begin. So the first gallery of the Pennsylvania German Center focuses on the theme of immigration and settlement in colonial Pennsylvania. And so we begin with a favorite object, something that would have been very common but is extremely rare to survive today, which is an immigrant chest. Thousands of immigrants came over from Germany before the American Revolution. And so in theory, there should be thousands of these chests that survive. But in reality, there's only about a dozen or so that are known to exist. This one dates to 1744. It has that here in the ironwork on the lid. But particularly if you look at the front of it, you can really see how this was meant for a voyage. It was outfitted to have two padlocks, one here, a second one over here. And then in the middle of the chest, there's also a built-in key-operated lock. So definitely meant to be very secure. The corners are all reinforced with iron bands and strapping, but yet still some decorative elements as well on the lid. But you think about one family, sharing this object and bringing over, all of their worldly goods, clothing, some dried food for the voyage, perhaps a family Bible. It's not that big of a suitcase for a family when they were immigrating. Right.
So some of the early groups that came to here that included the Lutherans, the Reformed, Mennonites, Amish people, and Moravians and Schwenkfelders, and just a number of different people from the German-speaking lands. And one of those groups was the Ephrata Cloister. So they were sort of an ascetic community that were founded out in Ephrata in Lancaster County by Conrad Beissel. And they sort of lived a really a lifestyle that was very simple. And so they had things like this hanging cupboard here, which was made for storing devotional books and other personal possessions. It was used as the sister's house. They probably didn't have a blacksmith at the time, so everything is made of wooden peg construction. They did have some iron nails to use. The desk was also here made for the cloister, so the rooms would have been outfitted with some of these simple things. The community slept very little. They only slept about 3 hours a night. They feasted on simple broth, and they slept on wooden boards. So it was quite an interesting lifestyle compared to their other contemporaries. Some other people that were living in the area were the Mennonites. So Mennonites practiced foot washing. So you see this foot washing tub here. And then sort of throughout the Mennonite community, one thing that was really popular was a book called The Martyr's Mirror, which was printed at the Ephrata Cloister. And this book here is one of the Martyr's Mirror, which sort of talks about the different persecutions of the Christian and Anabaptist faith. And it was first published in Dutch in 1660.
So we also make the point in this gallery that the Germans weren't the only people by any means to settle here in colonial Pennsylvania. And so over in this corner, we do represent the Dutch and the Swedish elements with the spoon rack and the watercolor birth record made for Joseph Rambo of what's now Montgomery County, perhaps inspired by the Pennsylvania German Fractor tradition. And then, of course, there were a lot of Quakers who were settling in Pennsylvania, including William Penn himself, the colony's founder. And so we have some examples here of some really classic, mostly Chester County Quaker furniture, beginning with the paneled back or wainscot side chair there, probably Chester County, very typical form of higher end Quaker seating furniture, would have been used with a cushion of some sort to help soften that hard plank seat there on the chair. Beautiful turnings there on the front stretcher of that piece. So that's your typical Chester County Quaker furniture. And then the Quakers are also known for a distinctive type of inlaid decoration. Today, we often refer to this as line and berry. And you can see that particularly here on the drawers, these two drawers on the front of this semi-tall chest where we have the owner's initials ES, as well as the date 1746. And each of those are kind of in this little tablet, and then there's little stringing or lines that come out, and then these clusters of berries at the ends of those. Now there's many different makers of this line and berry furniture. Sometimes you see every drawer inlaid, sometimes just a few of them. There's also spice boxes are another typical form you find this line and berry inlay on. And so here's an example with RM as the owner's initials, but full inlay there on the door, along with our German Erzgebirge wood carvings as part of our Christmas display. Not something the Quakers would have used, I'm sure. But so, yeah, we definitely want to convey this Chester County Quaker influence, which is not too far from where we are here in Montgomery County.
So in Trappe in particular, we were one of the sort of hotbeds for American Lutheranism. And in 1717, the town was founded by the Schrack family, which was home to sort of this early Lutheran congregation, which became known as Augustus Lutheran. And so you can see the church here on the wall. That's right down the street from us at historic Trappe, built in 1743. And it's one of the oldest Lutheran churches in the country. It's got a fabulous interior with original woodwork, original pews that were rented out by the participants of the congregation, and it includes some of this amazing faux marbling on some of the pillars there. We actually have the communion service here from that church. The large flagon was attributed to Johann Philip Alberti from Philadelphia, and some of the other pieces are likely made in Cologne, Germany. The desk that it's sitting on was an altar from St. Peter's Lutheran Church in Chester County, dated 1801. And then interestingly, we also have some amazing weather vanes that were sitting on top of Augustus Lutheran Church. They were actually on top of the church for quite a while until we actually had Colonial Williamsburg made reproductions for them. And so we have the originals here in the Trappe Tavern Museum. And so this weather vane here for 1743 was on the church. And the other weather vane that we actually attained our logo for, which has tulips on it, is on loan now to the Museum of the American Revolution. And then what you're seeing now, this 1751, was on their original schoolhouse.
All right, so now we're going to head into our furniture gallery. So this gallery is really intended to showcase furniture masterworks produced by Pennsylvania German craftsmen and different types of decoration. So we have carving, we have inlay, and we have painted decoration that we feature in here. The showstopper piece here when you walk into the gallery is this incredible Lancaster desk and bookcase. It's on long-term loan to us from the Dietrich American Foundation. And just an incredible example of the skilled German cabinet makers working in Lancaster County, and particularly the carvers right within Lancaster Borough. And one of the distinct things that differentiates this Lancaster School of Carving is if we look up at the pediment, all of that carving is done from a single solid board. And so there's incredible high relief to all of that foliage that has to be created. And in the process of doing that, there would have been all sorts of tool marks left on the board from scooping and gouging all of that out. And so the maker, after he did all of his leaves, he then used like a stippling tool to cover the ground around all of that relief carving. And it creates a sort of matted effect in the low areas in contrast with the highlights on the carving. So it's just an incredible piece of furniture. And we also have in this gallery a tea table and a high chest from Lancaster, probably by different craftsmen, but using those same techniques of carving from the solid wood. In Philadelphia, what we would see instead would be a flat board, and the foliate carving would have been executed separately and then applied to the surface of that board using little sprig nails to secure it.
We also feature pieces in the gallery made by local religious groups. So one of the pieces here is this Brettstuhl chair made for the Moravian congregation in Nazareth, Pennsylvania. The chair was originally in the Moravian Sisters' house in Nazareth. It's sort of known as a Brettstuhl or board chair. And it's typically called a Moravian chair in America because you see these chairs typically throughout Moravian chapels and throughout their sort of communal spaces. It's made with dovetails with a cool tool called a grothodel, and it's sort of a typical Germanic craftsman piece that you would see in that community. However, they didn't only make sort of these peasant pieces, they also made tall clocks. So this movement here is made by Augusta Neisser, who was living in Germantown. The case is attributed to William Baumberger. So the Moravians were quite prolific. They were not only in Bethlehem and Nazareth, Pennsylvania, but there was a little community in Philadelphia. They also were out in Lidditz, Pennsylvania, Emmaus, and then all the way, of course, down in Salem, North Carolina.
So I mentioned at the beginning that this gallery was featuring different types of decoration. So here we're seeing some pretty spectacular inlay on this hybrid wardrobe or schrank and desk piece. Unfortunately, we don't know really where in Pennsylvania this piece was from, but surely someday we think something will turn up that has similar inlay decoration. So we keep looking, but very architectural, with this interrupted cornice on the piece, the denoline, the keystones. So great example of Pennsylvania German inlay. And then for something completely different, this easy chair here from Philadelphia, which is, I think, the polar opposite of the Moravian plank seat chair that Chris just talked about. So this was made for a German immigrant named David Deschler, who became a very wealthy merchant after he had come over and settled in Philadelphia and then Germantown. And so here you have, a beautiful example of Philadelphia carving here on the knees. In this case, done from the solid rather than applied. But this chair is all about luxury and comfort, for the Deschler family. They were friends with the Muhlenberg family. Deschler himself converted to become a Quaker after his marriage, and he built a large stone house in Germantown, which is where George Washington stayed in 1793 when yellow fever had become such an epidemic in Philadelphia.
And sort of going the opposite direction again, we have some of these amazing painted pieces. Pennsylvania Germans sort of were prolific in painting everything in their houses, from their furniture to their walls. And so we have some of these amazing pieces painted in this sort of really nice blue, this candle stand here and this child slapback chair. We put these pieces here specifically to show off that in Pennsylvania German portraiture, you actually see some of these pieces as well. So in this portrait here of John George and Anna Christina Kitzmiller, which is attributed to Jacob Mantell, you see John George sitting there with his wife. He was a Revolutionary War veteran. This was probably taken only 1 year before he died, 1823. They actually lived out in York County, which became, part of it became Adams County. And it was painted by Jacob Mantell, who was a German immigrant. And he first appeared in Baltimore, Maryland, eventually moving up to the Schaefferstown area, and then eventually would go out to Indiana, where he died. But he has quite a huge body of work, mostly side portraits, and then some portraits like this that you see straight on. And you can somewhat see in this portrait this sort of simple interior, but nice paint and nice either carpet or a painted floor mat there.
All right, so we'll head from here into our folk art gallery. And so here on the wall, we have just an incredible assortment of Pennsylvania German Fractor. So these, well, first of all, the word Fractor is based on the Latin root referring to the fractured style of this lettering. So think, sort of old Gothic lettering, and it has this kind of interrupted or fractured style. But in Pennsylvania, this really becomes its own art historical genre that refers to these works on paper, usually with decorations of flowers and angels and birds and all sorts of things. The most common types of Fractor are birth and baptismal certificates produced by Lutheran and Reformed church members. And this piece right here, made by immigrant artist Conrad Gilbert. But the really important thing about this is that most of that lettering done in blue is actually filled out by Henry Muhlenberg. the Lutheran pastor who lived here in Trappe. And we know, thanks to his journals, that he was picked up here in Trappe and taken to a nearby church to baptize children the next day, including the Matthias Gilbert that this piece was made for. So the family must have decided to, have the pastor rather than the Fractor artist do the infill on that piece. So just an amazing survival, and to be able to bring that back home here to Trappe is quite special. Now, below that on the wall is a slightly later printed birth and baptismal certificate with all of these distinctive motifs, butterflies and flowers and things. But I'll call your attention to the praying children here kneeling in prayer, flanking the central text block. This is a woodcut that's stamped here on the certificate, but it is based on a painting done in London by Sir Joshua Reynolds called The Infant Samuel that he exhibited in 1776. And so somehow that painting makes its way to Pennsylvania. It's copied into the local Germanic print culture. And here on this certificate for Katharina Mayer, the daughter of Johannes Mayer. Well, he's actually a very important cabinet maker in the Mahantongo Valley of central Pennsylvania. And so the painted chest that we have below this Fractor is attributed to Mayer's hand. And if we look carefully on the front of that, you'll see a very similar praying child motif to the left and the right. And thanks to the Fractor, we know for sure that Mayer had access to that imagery, because his own daughter had a certificate printed with it.
And the Mahantongo Valley furniture is pretty distinctive. So it's up in the current day Schuylkill County in Northumberland County. One of the pieces we have in this room is sort of really indicative of that piece. This is sort of a chest of drawers here, and you see all kinds of different motifs from the birds and the flowers and the tulips. But one of the most distinctive parts of Mahantongo Valley furniture is this sort of little stamped motif here. And what it was actually made from was a wine cork, where they would have carved the wine cork and they would have dipped it in the specific different color paints and then stamped it all over. And so most Mahantongo Valley pieces that are painted have this. Mahantongo is also interesting because it came at a time when chrome yellow, the paint, was sort of coming into fruition. And so you would then have different types of paints that you could then mix with that chrome yellow. So you get these really nice greens and the sort of nice Prussian blues out of that as well. And so the painted furniture is quite colorful and quite distinctively Pennsylvania. On top, we have these Wilhelm Schimmel carvings. He's mostly known for doing carvings of eagles out in the Cumberland Valley of Pennsylvania. But we have these chickens here and this sort of parrot on the, looks like a basket of flowers, and then this really nice little dog here. And so he does do other forms, and these are some of his most unique.
We also have a grouping of Pennsylvania German needlework here, mostly from the Lancaster County area. But I'll particularly highlight this silkwork embroidery, which was made right here in Trappe in 1804 by Elizabeth Schrack. And so here's her name down here at the bottom. And then she puts 1804. She left out the 0 on that piece. But so she's the great granddaughter of our town's founder, Jacob Schrack, the German immigrant. There's a lot of Philadelphia influence in this piece, in the kind of strawberry border, as well as this rose motif in the middle. But so that's Elizabeth Schrack, 1804. She was born in 1790, so she's just about 14 years old when she makes that. And she lived until 1827 and is buried here in town at the Augustus Lutheran Church.
So this next gallery shows off a lot of our painted works. And so we have several paintings here by David Ellinger and local artist Charles Hoffman. Hoffman painted this piece right over here with the man in the horse and buggy, with the man in the blue and brown suit running right after him. We believe this scene was sort of local. He was at the Montgomery County Almshouse, staying there at the time. Charles Hoffman was an itinerant painter. He had problems with alcoholism through his whole life, so he really never had a home. He traveled from different county almshouses, from Northampton to Berks to Montgomery and up in Schuylkill. He likely painted this piece when he was at Montgomery, maybe traveling up to Schuylkill. The little town in the background is likely Pottstown, Pennsylvania, because there's a mile marker in the painting that says 40 miles from Philadelphia, which sort of sets this painting in that area. He did quite another famous painting of the Montgomery County Almshouse in the 1870s, which is right over here. Interestingly enough, for us here at Trappe, this almshouse is only 1.5 miles down the road from us, and so it's one of our visitors' most favorite pieces. This almshouse was founded in the 1830s after an 1826 Act of Pennsylvania made every county required to have an almshouse. The almshouse in this painting is still standing, so that brownstone building is still there. The roof line looks a little bit different, but some of the barns are still there. It's now a wildlife preserve. Hoffman would have painted this sort of along the Schuylkill River, which is the waterway that you're seeing here. His Montgomery County paintings are the only paintings he does with waterways, but that sort of Schuylkill River and Schuylkill Canal allowed him to do that and paint sort of these really nice, interesting things with boats and tillers and people fishing, etc.
So Hoffman was here in Montgomery County for several years on and off, but he was essentially an itinerant artist. In the other part of the gallery, we're featuring the work of David Ellinger, a 20th century artist who, while born in Philadelphia, really spent most of his life here in Trappe, first on his grandparents' farm, then in various rented apartments in Collegeville and Trappe, and then finally owning his own house in Main Street. This is Ellinger's most famous painting here next to me, titled Out of the Heart Comes the Issues of Life. He made this in 1943. And Ellinger was really, until that point, he was a self-taught folk artist. From a very early age as a child, we have crayon drawings and things in the collection that he was already making of tulips and hex signs and things. But then he was hired by the Works Progress Administration to work for the Index of American Design. He was assigned to do a lot of work at what's now the Philadelphia Museum of Art, drawing redware plates and other Pennsylvania German pieces in their collection. But I think this painting really speaks to both his love of brilliant colors, incredibly vivid colors, and also rural Pennsylvania German life, farm life. We see a lot of Amish figures in his paintings, which the family here appears to be Amish. And Ellinger really is responsible for popularizing this Pennsylvania German or Pennsylvania Dutch folk culture in his artwork in the 20th century. He's still incredibly collectible to this day, and his pieces come up a lot for auction, although they tend to be the more basic watercolors and theorem paintings and not the unique oil paintings like Out of the Heart. All right, so now we're in for a special treat. This is our Changing Exhibition Gallery, and we have a new show here that recently opened called Valley Culture, Constructing Identity Along the Great Wagon Road. And so we feature 6 different distinct valleys throughout southeastern Pennsylvania, moving to central PA, western PA, and then into the Shenandoah Valley of Virginia. And this was really a way to, look at the really unique, distinct painted decoration on painted chests, painted boxes, as well as the Fractor art within 6 of these very identifiable valleys. And so I'm going to begin here with the talk about our most local valley. Right here where we are in Montgomery County, it's called the Perkiomen Valley. And so these are all examples of local Fractor and local painted furniture here on the wall. This region is a little bit of a melting pot of different, even among the Germans, religious groups. We have Lutherans, we have Reformed, we have Schwenkfelders, we have Mennonites. There's a small Moravian settlement even, as well as some other English-speaking groups. The great painted chest here has the name of the owner, Daniel Ice, and the date 1795 on the front of this. And we know Daniel was confirmed in 1791 at a Union congregation, so a church that was shared between a Lutheran and a Reformed denomination. And it was right on the border of Berks and Montgomery counties. When Daniel died, he was buried at the Boyertown Mennonite church. So this is a great example of painted decoration in general. But this sort of red, white, and blue color palette to this chest is something I've really come to associate with Montgomery County and the Perkiomen Valley area. The lid on this one survives in just really incredible condition with these great compass or pinwheel designs and the hearts there. And also it was made for a man. And this helps dispel the myth that these were dower chests, just made for women, because we find a lot of examples that in fact do have young men's names on them. And these pieces really were kind of a footlocker, if you will, that a teenage boy or teenage girl would be given one of these by their parents and able to use this to store their various possessions in it. And then when they got married, of course, they would take the chest with them. Now, hanging above the chest on the wall is a dazzling array of local Fractor from the Perkiomen Valley. All sorts of pieces. I mean, I love all of these pieces. It's hard to choose a few favorites. But we have a great Adam and Eve example here by an artist named Durs Rudy, who was a Swiss immigrant that settles first here in the Skippack area before then moving to the Lehigh Valley. And then we have this really incredible trio of pieces. The earliest one by a Mennonite schoolmaster, Jacob Godshaw. If we look closely, you see these women kind of standing with their hands on their hips in these striped dresses. So Jacob Godshall's work is clearly the inspiration for his son Samuel Godshall's piece, done around in 1835, it's dated. And that connection has been known for some time. But what we hadn't really focused on was the work of another artist, Andreas Kolb, a contemporary of Jacob's. And we see a very similar woman standing there with this checked apron, hands on the hips, stripes on her gown. So, just showing these cross cultural influences among different schoolmasters. And then moving further right, we've got Schweinfelder examples. And on the far right, that kind of plain looking alphabet piece, one of the earliest known dated Fractor from 1762, attributed to Christopher Dock, a Mennonite schoolmaster who writes one of the first treatises on childhood education, in which he encouraged rewarding good behavior rather than punishing bad behavior. And he specifically suggests giving well-behaved children a little drawing of a flower or a bird or something if they had been good in school. So clearly a reference to kind of a reward of merit done in Fractor.
So the next valley that we featured is the Cocalico Valley of Lancaster County. It sort of has boroughs in Adamstown, Denver, and Ephrata. And you see two significant artists coming out of that area. And one is the compass artist, which you see right here. The compass artist is called that way because we don't know who the artist itself was. But they used a compass on their pieces to actually inscribe the boxes with these designs and then would later paint them. So some of these boxes are sort of known in the area. They sort of have names associated with them based on the ownership, etc. But the name of the artist hasn't come to light yet. He has made several, or they have made several different types of boxes. So some of these dome lid boxes of various sizes to smaller ones. They've even made these slide lid boxes here, which you can see over here, which could have been used to store some type of valuables or perhaps candles. But the embellishment is quite interesting. There's quite a few of these pieces out there. So, they were quite a prolific artist. But someday, hopefully, the compass artist will be revealed and we'll know more about their life. Another artist that we featured is Johannes Weber. Weber lived in East Earl Township in Lancaster County, and he was living in Laycock Township later on. His father, Abraham Weber, was a miller, and the whole Weber family sort of got involved with this. And so Johannes Weber is sort of the one that we attribute most of these boxes to, but some of them could have been done by his father or siblings. He did a number of boxes, as you can see, different types, different sizes. Some have, smaller feet on them. They've got these little hasp blocks. But the most noticeable thing is that he's doing these sort of painted houses with sort of Georgian details and Georgian chimneys and little trees and flowers, tulips and things like that. His boxes range from, something that's a little bit over 7 or 8 inches to really small ones that sort of go down in size. So you have one that's this little black one here with a little house on the front. And then they sort of all range down to very small with this red one here at the end. He also did slide lid boxes like the compass artist. And so you see this sort of slide lid box here with somebody's initials on it. And then next to that, you see this little cradle that he designed as well in a nice red, which is sort of a different color for Weber. And then, of course, we have another Jacob Mantell portrait here. This one is of John and Katerina Bickel. The Bickels lived in Jonestown, Lebanon County, but this painting is most significant that we get to see the interior of their house with these brilliant blue walls covered in tiny white flowers. We get to see their colorful carpet or painted floor cloth again, just like the other portrait we saw. The Bickels also get to show off that they're sort of sitting in fancy painted furniture, and they have these amazing gilt, elaborate looking glasses behind them. John Bickel was the postmaster of Jonestown for 57 years. He retired in 1859 as the oldest postmaster. And so it lets us sort of show off Mantell's work, but also to show off the interiors and sort of the varied interiors of Pennsylvania Germans, that they not only were, with things that looked primitive or painted or, folk arty like, but they were also using things with classical style.
So from the Cocalico Valley, now we're going to go here into the Tulpehocken Valley. And so this is another distinct region named after the Tulpehocken Creek, located in what's now western Berks County and eastern Lebanon County. And there's some really influential Fractor artists working in this region, as well as furniture decorators. First, I'm going to point out this Fractor here at the top left. And I think in the light, you might even get a bit of that gold sparkle coming off of that piece. This is by an artist named Friedrich Krebs on a printed form in Reading. But Krebs was actually importing from Germany or purchasing from an importer a type of gilded paper known as brocade paper, and then cutting out the designs and gluing them onto the front of his Fractor. And there was just an article published about this by Trevor Brandt in the new issue of Americana Insights. So we're really excited to have an example of that brocade paper decoupage, if you will, here on view. So Krebs is one of the most prolific Fractor artists. Personally, I don't think he's one of the most talented of all the artists. I would put my money on this guy, Heinrich Otto here, who I think is just incredible. And this is a signed example of Heinrich Otto's work. His name, the signature is right here at the bottom, Heinrich Otto, and above that it's saying, written by. So we know for sure this is an example. And he is just so prolific and so influential, just influencing generations of other Fractor artists, as well as within his own family. So if we go from the Heinrich Otto piece, and this is another beautiful example of his work, one of his latest known pieces, but then up above it here on the wall, here's a piece by Friedrich Speyer, clearly basing his birds, his tulips, his mermaids coming out of Otto's work. And then also 4 of Heinrich Otto's sons all go on to be Fractor artists. And we have examples of Fractor done by each of them on the wall. So at the top is son William Otto, who was a Fractor artist. He was a farmer. He was also a carpenter and a furniture decorator. This is a pretty classic example of his work, signed for him, written by William Otto, and also made for his own daughter. This was his daughter Anna Maria's birth and baptismal certificate. So we have William, who's working in Schuylkill County, and then in the middle, this is another son, Daniel Otto, who moves a little bit more west into central Pennsylvania in Center County, but he's doing these very distinct, what are sometimes called flat tulips, these 2-dimensional tulips, and also these bright parrots with the checkered wings. So that's a good example of Daniel's work. And then here at the bottom, probably the son who most resembles his father's work. This is Jacob Otto, using a printed certificate produced at the Ephrata Cloister with woodcut stamps applied to that, but then all hand-colored decoration, and then a very nice Fractor writing, a lot like his father's, Here, this is Magdalena Metz's birth and baptismal certificate. Jacob is also a carpenter and a furniture decorator. And perhaps the father Heinrich Otto was too. There are some pieces that I would attribute to him. But the painted chest here from the Tolbachen Valley is actually not one of the ones I attribute to Otto. But this is from a large, distinctive group that are associated with a kind of murky figure called the embroidery artist, based on this, very careful lettering and decoration, all of this fine penwork and brushwork of the lines. This piece was made for Katharina Lebenstein, dated 1789. She lived in what would now be the Milbach area of Lebanon County. Her father was a German immigrant and a member of what would now be considered the Church of the Brethren. And so the Lebenstein family are pretty much all buried there in the local Brethren meeting house in the Milbach area. But her chest is one of the earliest and certainly the most distinctive of that group. The pomegranate motifs, the zigzag borders on those tombstone-shaped panels are all kind of classic hallmarks of this embroidery artist group of painted chests.
So we also returned to the Mahantango Valley in the exhibition with this amazing, stunning piece. This is the first time that this piece has ever been on view. It's descended in the Knorr family since it's been in the Mahantango Valley. It's one of the earliest dated pieces, sort of the 1829, and it also is the most highly decorated Mahantango piece that we know of. And so again, you're seeing all of the different motifs, from the birds to the praying children again, to the angels that you see on some of the other Fractor. It has the most colors, so it has this salmon color that most of them don't have, which you can see in the little rosettes here. And it has the sort of the green color and then the chrome yellow that they're introducing at the time period. But one of the features that this piece has that no other pieces have are these two women on both sides that have this amazing checkered dresses. And so there's one on that side that's holding two tulips. She's got this amazing headpiece on, and it was all done by, you can see scribe lines into the wood, and then they would have painted in the scribe lines. And so, yeah, she's got two tulips there. She's standing on this little sort of square piece there, and has the same sort of salmon color face on her features, and a belt, and probably a handkerchief around her neck there. These women are on no other pieces that we know of, and so this really sort of makes this piece probably the best Mahantango chest out there. And so we're really happy to have this piece on view, especially since it's the first time that it's ever been on view. Related to these two pieces are these Scherenschnitte scissor cutting cut works here. They're both done by Isaac Faustili, who lived up in the Mahantango Valley. He was a German Reformed minister who was ordained in 1826 and was the pastor of Salem Reformed Church in what's called Rough and Ready Upper Mahantango Township. They feature these eagles eating the snakes with the American flag, signed by Isaac Steely, one from April the 4th, 1844, one from June 21st, 1841. The chest that we just saw was attributed to Johannes Mayer, and so this cut work in particular was made for John Mayer, so his anglicized name here. And then we have one next to it made for Anna Mayer in 1841, possibly related to John Mayer, maybe his daughter, maybe somebody else in the family. But Isaac Faustili was, by marriage, related to the Mayers. I think his son married one of Mayer's daughters. And so it was fabulous to have these two pieces hanging above a chest by Johannes Mayer.
So continuing our journey westward then to western Pennsylvania, going from central to western now, this group of furniture and Fractor is from the Brothers Valley, part of what's now Somerset County, PA. And this is an area that was pretty sparsely settled until the late 1700s, but then a number of Mennonites and Brethren and later some Amish families began settling there. People might be more familiar with the term soap hollow furniture, which is a later 19th century group of makers that are working in that same Somerset County region. But this incredible checkerboard decorated furniture, mostly small boxes, small chests, and this one known hanging cupboard are coming out of that region from an earlier date. We don't yet know who the artist is who's making these pieces, but you can see that checkerboard decoration and the sort of spiky tulips that unite the pieces. The checkering in particular is really deeply scored into the wood of the objects before each little individual square is painted by the artist. So that's definitely something we've noticed in studying these about the technique. Only one of these pieces, it's that kind of hanging lift lid box there in the back left with the yellow, that's the only one that has any kind of a name or a date on it. In this case, it has Christina Hoffman, the original owner's name, and the date 1841. Now, unfortunately, the Hoffman surname is pretty common in the Brothers Valley, and so we haven't yet been able to figure out, exactly which Christina that was made for. The hanging corner cupboard is, clearly the same decorator as the little boxes. Here's that spiky tulip motif again on these. There's even some chip carving along the bottom of the stiles that clearly relates to some chip carving on the boxes. So whoever is making these is clearly capable of also producing larger pieces of furniture. And then the trio of Fractor that we have here, these are all examples done by the same artist. He was long known as just the Brothers Valley artist until he was recently identified by a scholar, Jeannie Woods. And so we now know that he's a schoolmaster, Johann Heinrich Schumacher, who worked first in the Lehigh County area and then moved west to the Brothers Valley in 1808 and continued to make Fractor. So we have an Amish birth record here on the left made for Abner Yoder, who was born, looking for, looks like 1816, I think is the date at the bottom of that. And then a little reward of merit on the right, dated 1809 for Elizabeth Martin. And then it says in Brothers Valley Township under her name. So probably given to her by her schoolmaster, Schumacher, for good behavior or learning her alphabet. And then underneath that is a birth and baptismal certificate done for Friedrich Kuhlmann. And so this is a more elaborate example of Schumacher's work. But we're really excited to be able to borrow these pieces from private collections and have Somerset County Fractor represented in addition to these better known checkerboard boxes from the region.
And then of course, probably our star piece of the entire show is this hanging cupboard made for Jacob Strickler, which is attributed to Johannes Spittler. And so these pieces here are from the Shenandoah Valley of Virginia, which would have been settled by Germans who sort of traveled through Pennsylvania, making their way all the way out there to Western Pennsylvania and then turning down through West Virginia and then eventually settling in that Shenandoah Valley region. Many of them were in the Massanutten Mountain region where most of these pieces were made. And so, yeah, this is sort of one of the most amazing pieces made for Strickler. It was actually found in a closet in the home of Jesse T. Modisette, and it was descended in the family of the Fractor artist Jacob Strickler. It's sort of the only known form of this piece that we know, and it features this amazing leaping stag, which is found on a tall case clock also attributed to Spittler. The deer is sort of famous among Pennsylvania German decorative arts, and you can find it in all kinds of things from Fractor, redware, long rifles, and painted chests. And it kind of also shows you that the Pennsylvania Germans were not only making chests and things like that, they were making these hanging cupboards and using classical forms like fluted columns and dentil molded cornices, etc.
The painted chest below the cupboard is a more recent discovery among Spittler's work. And we've been helped by Betsy Davison, who's researching Spittler for a book project. But so she helped interpret the name on the front of this chest, a little bit cryptic, but she believes this was made for an Anna Rothgeb, who was actually the wife of the Fractor artist Jacob Strickler. So potentially these two pieces both are made for the Stricklers and descend in that family. There's also Johannes Spittler's initials here, the date 1800, and then it says it was number 70. So presumably the 70th chest that he had painted. This, is another iconic example of Spittler's work with this geometric decoration, this, red, white, and blue color palette on the chest that we see a lot on the hanging cupboard and other pieces by him. And one of the things I was excited about was being able to introduce our viewers and museum goers to this Fractor that we can attribute to Jacob Strickler. This is on loan to us from Ursinus College just down the street in the collection of the Berman Museum of Art. And so it's definitely an example of Strickler's work, not really a well-known piece at all, but one that I had cataloged when I was a student there at Ursinus. And so this is a foreshrift or a writing sample, pretty typical Fractor type out of the Mennonite culture. But at the bottom of this piece, it has this inscription saying it was made for Isaac Sauer, living in Shenandoah County, Virginia, the 31st of March, 1814. So we have everything but Strickler's signature on this. But also, I was really struck, once we installed this, that the color palette, this kind of red, white, and blue palette at the top certainly relates visually to the painted furniture being made by Spittler. And also this kind of floral motif of all these little concentric, like double petals or hearts, if you will. It really reminds me of the group of hearts on the front of the Rothgeb chest. So I think that, at least having them here in juxtaposition goes to show the close relationship between Fractor artist Jacob Strickler and the furniture decorator Johannes Spittler. And so that is the last of our 6 valleys here that we cover in the Valley Culture exhibition. The exhibit is open through August of 2025, so there's still lots of time to come and see the show. And we are also going to be producing a catalog. And so that will be available early in the new year. We finished the photography, working on the writing, but that will be a permanent record of the exhibition for everybody to be able to access this information anytime, anywhere.
Yeah. So yeah, thank you for joining us at Historic Trappe in the Center for Pennsylvania German Studies, and we hope you come and visit us soon. We have a lot to see. We have a Christmas coming up and all kinds of exhibitions and a really major thing happening next year as well.
Thank you very much.